Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com. And now, as you can see, hold on, Jewish Press, a columnist for the biggest Jewish weekly in the United States. So congratulations for that, Mark.
Thank you. And I have a column called The Albany Beat, and I talk about how the government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. And today we have a really special and prominent return guest, Assemblyman Jim Tedisco.
Good to be back on the Jewish View, Mark, and congratulations.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
And you've been in the Assembly since 1983?
1983.
Wow.
Yeah. I was 11 years old when I got elected. They made a special law, so
I even knew your predecessor, Clark Wemple. So
Clark Wemple.
I have to tell you, I've been there since '79.
Wow.
But
he beats me.
I remember when
I
you
know
were
what he's
sworn.
going to say. He was there when he was 10 years old.
That's right. Well, so
He
I
doesn't
wanted
have
to.
that tenure, though.
But in that time period, you have really accomplished, as a member of the Republican minority in the Assembly, you've accomplished quite a few achievements. And I just wanted to mention some of them. The New York State Animal Advocacy Day, the Used Resources Accountability Act, which has been renamed the New York Store, from the governor.
Use resources from the state, put them on a website instead of throwing them out the door so they can get more money for their budgets to spend more.
So we utilize eBay and Craigslist more. You had the first property tax cap bill. It was called the Property Taxpayers Protection Act.
Yep.
You rolled back Cuomo's plan, Governor Cuomo's plan, the second Governor Cuomo, the current Governor Cuomo, right?
Yeah.
Plan to force drivers to get unnecessary new DMV license plates.
That's right.
Which I thank you for. You helped pass, now I don't know what helped pass means, but non-custodial release to protect children from being abducted.
Yeah, I authored the bill.
You authored the bill.
I was the chairman of a task force on child abduction and missing children. Traveled across the state, had several hearings. And what we found out from these hearings is that non-custodial dads, angry at their moms in this case, and I'm sure moms were doing the same thing as non-custodial, would go to elementary schools and say, I'm here to pick up Johnny, join my son. They'd let him out the door, and they'd disappear.
Because he's the biological parent, then they had to.
They would let him go.
And now they don't have to.
Now, the custodial parent leaves a list of only 4 or 5 names. Anybody who is not on that list, who doesn't have identification, cannot come to the school and pick up an elementary school.
Wow.
So protections against non-custodial. And it's not easy to pass a statewide bill when you're outnumbered 106 Democrats to 44 Republicans. So you have to have the character, content, and quality of your idea, and you've got to make the case. And
very good.
You're talking about how I made the case several times.
And here you also enacted the civil confinement law to keep dangerous sex offenders off the streets. I was wondering if there were some sex offenders who were not dangerous, but we have.
I think my response to you is the only ones that are not dangerous are probably the dead ones.
The dead ones, yeah. So all sex offenders are dangerous. So it's a little redundant. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then you have you proposed a lot of legislation for this year.
Don't forget Proposition 2, which was just enacted by 77% to go digital in New York State.
Right, so we don't have to have as much paper.
Constitutional change. It was a win-win-win. Makes us more efficient, takes all that paper off our desk, saves $13 million a year. And guess what? Mother Nature will shed a tear because all that ink-filled paper, tons and reams of it, won't be going in landfills anymore. What a win that was. And to get that passed with only 44 members on my side, I had to stand up on the floor and make that case several times.
But isn't Finch Prine paper crying, if not Mother
No,
Nature?
they make paper cups, they make paper plates. There's a lot of other products that, you got to build houses with wood and everything. So they're
okay? They're good with this?
We're not there to build houses and use taxpayers' money inappropriately. We're there to save them money.
So let me ask you, it took about halfway through this legislative session to get the computers and actually enact what the voters voted on in November.
Yes, and that was of real concern. But we've got them in place now. And actually this year, once we even got the tablets in place, we still brought the paper in this year.
Yeah, I saw that.
And their argument for that was, well, we've got to see to make sure the tablets work properly because the Constitution says, and this is why we can talk about messages of necessity and using messages of necessity. We have to have a bill on our desk for 3 days, according to the Constitution. Now, Rabbi and Mark, you know why that is. We have to read them. We're representatives, okay? When they say, get her done, bring in a 1,000-page bill, put it on our desk, and don't worry about reading it, don't worry about debating it, well, that's diminishing representative democracy. We have to be able to read the bills. And with this tablet, we won't need all that paper to have it on our desk for 3 days.
So this was like transitional period.
Transitional. Next
So-
year, they promise no more paper.
No more paper, because I was going to tell you, I
all the
saw the
tablets.
paper coming in. I was like, what is all this
Yeah.
about? You know, so I'm glad you clarified that. But you also, you also authored a lot of bills this year. Did you have any success this past legislative session?
Well, that's a good question to ask.
And how do you
because
measure success?
There was very little success in
Anyway.
all the important issues we were expected to do this year. And that's something I know we wanted to talk about. We have a 6-month session, and there's a lot of discussion now. Well, you know, there's corruption taking place, and legislators don't get paid. Granted, we haven't had a pay raise in 16 years. But they've shown they don't deserve a pay raise. And I hate to have to say that because I think I'm productive. I show up when there's a 10 o'clock session at 9:30. And you know what happens at 10:15? Some flunky walks in and says, oh, it's canceled till 12 o'clock. I come back at 11:30 when it's 12 o'clock. Some flunky walks in, oh, 12:15, it's been canceled till 5 o'clock. I walk in, oh, it's been canceled till tomorrow. That's unacceptable. There was one session day this year, and you won't believe this, I don't think, where we started on time. Do you think anybody who works in our Assembly or Senate districts cannot show up for work every day that they work, not on time, not fulfill their obligations, the workload they're expected to do?
Well, unless you work for a legislator.
Well, yeah, well, they even have to show up. They have to be there. They don't have to be on the floor. We have to be on the floor to do that work.
Right, but even staff for the legislators don't have to show up on time.
Well, I make my staff show up on time,
Well,
to
you're
my
the-
office, okay?
Yeah, right.
But
You're
this
the-
is getting to the floor where we can debate and vote.
Okay.
So the
I'm
point
just-
I'm making,
yes,
not
yes.
only that, we knew what the 5 or 6 most important issues were in January. The rent control concern, the property tax cap extension.
And education investment tax credit?
Yep, you got them down. And now working with charter schools,
Right.
The tax credit for downstate with the rental landlords and things
Right.
like that.
The DREAM Act?
Dream Act. So they waited 6 months, and they said, well, we haven't done any of these. They spun their wheels. We got to go an extra session. 1 week, 7, 8 days, tens of thousands of dollars of extra money
Yeah.
for per diems to come in. And then guess what they did? They waited to the 8th day of our 7 or 8 day session, okay, after they spun their wheels for 6 months, and they had all 5 or 6 bills done. The most important bills, they got them done in 1 week.
But don't
Now,
you-
what's that tell you?
It
If they
tells
got
you
them
that
done,
everyone needs a deadline.
that's right.
And if you don't have the deadline, you're never going to get it done. Even even in your own life, you need a deadline.
That's right.
If you have a project, let's say you're writing a book, and the publisher doesn't give you a deadline, you're going to keep writing the book.
Here's the problem, though. Who was penalized because they didn't fit their deadline? The taxpayers of New York State. Now, here's the point I'm trying to make. If in 1 week, because they work on a crisis basis, they can get all these bills completed, why do you need a 6-month session? If you've shown, they shot themselves in the foot. But here's the other kicker. They wanted to use messages of necessity after 6 months and 1 week to bring the bills out, a 1,000-page bill, millions of dollars being spent, billions maybe, put them on our desk and say, get her done.
That's the
Finish
big.
it right
they
now.
call it the big ugly.
Yeah.
That
And you know what
it's
their
an
argument?
omnibus bill where
Yep.
everything's included in one big package.
That's right, the big. You know what their argument was? Well, if you don't let us use messages of necessity, it's going to cost taxpayers more money. That's like the boy who kills his parents, goes before the judge and says, I want mercy, I'm pleading mercy because I'm an orphan. These guys created this situation. They created the extra days of it. Then they want to blame legislators who actually want to read the bills for 3 days, 1,000 pages, debate them, show what the good and the bad, the ugly was. Let the media know what it was. Let the population know what their majority and minority voters are voting for. And then they say, well, we need a full 12-year session. We got to go full time because there's too much corruption.
12 months.
But
Yeah.
you know,
I got to pay
okay.
people who are corrupt to go full time to convince them not to be corrupt.
You-
You know why 3 months? And this is the bill that maybe we could talk about
Yeah.
going to 3 months
Right.
instead of a 6-month session.
Right.
But go ahead.
But I want to talk to you about you're a legislator, assemblyman from the Capital District. Don't you think that having a session for 6 months helps the economy in the Capital District? The legislators, the staff, they all go out for dinners, they buy things, they're all in town for something. Shouldn't we boost the Capital District economy?
You're right about one thing. Government should help the economy, but they shouldn't help the economy by using taxpayers' dollars to pay for extra workers that we don't need, like those people who are bringing out all the paper. I went digital, and we're going to probably lose some staff people. But our job isn't pay people with taxpayers' dollars to make work when we can do it for less money. Our job is to make small businesses, big businesses, entrepreneurs successful by getting rid of mandates, regulations, the property taxes. So, no, I don't think we should be here for 6 months to help the economy with taxpayers' dollars. The way we can help the economy and small businesses by investing in those small businesses, by taking the shackles off them, so people can buy their goods and services. They can go out to Sonic's, which just opened up here in the capital region, have some nice hamburgers and ice cream there. So creating an environment. See,
well, we also have a kosher restaurant in Albany, Terra, which is Sonic's not kosher, so we have a kosher restaurant on Washington Avenue, 3 blocks up from the Capitol.
Kosher's
so
good.
If you didn't know about it, I should take you, and we should go have a meal at
a meal and
Terra.
a treat.
Okay.
Because government shouldn't be treating the symptoms; they should be curing the illness.
Okay, so let's
and
talk
the illness
about
is an economy bereft of opportunity.
Let's briefly talk about the message of necessity and the 3-day waiting period. Because you want like a 2/3 vote in order to approve a message of necessity.
I got a bill called the New York State Government Transparency Act. Look, it does two things. First of all, our founding fathers were smart. The one thing they did was say, you should have the bills on your desk for 3 days. You're a representative. You have to vote on these bills. You have to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to read the bill. Now, Nancy Pelosi said something a little different at one time about Obamacare. We got to pass the bill to find out what it's like. Oh, my God. What kind of legislator would you need to just pass bills through to find out what it's like? I mean, they wouldn't read the bills. They wouldn't understand the bills. All right?
Well, that's like the SAFE Act. And then when they read the bill, they found out they needed a little tweak here and there.
Yeah, quite a few tweaks. So it's supposed to be for an emergency. The second part of the way they were smart was that, but there may be an emergency in the Assemblyman where 3 days are too long to wait. Sandy, the storm would be coming. Right. Terrorist attack, a financial situation. I understand that. They were right about that. But these are not emergency bills. These are bills to stop representative democracy from working, to stop us from reading the bills and the governor and the majorities, the powerful elements, from getting things done without real representation reading them and taking them to task on the bad parts of these pieces of legislation. So my bill is simple. It says it should be an emergency if you're going to use a message of necessity, and we shouldn't be working unless it is a real emergency from 12 o'clock at night through the midnight hours into 8 a.m. Why should we be working in the middle of the night when media can't be there, the public's in bed sleeping? They shouldn't be having nightmares when they're sleeping about what we were doing. They should be having sweet dreams. And they're not going to have sweet dreams when they bring these bills out in the middle of the night.
So what
Look, let me just say one more thing. Armies use sleep deprivation against their enemies to confuse them. We're not enemies. They shouldn't be using sleep deprivation in the middle of the night.
So I think it was the end of session, or was it the budget? I don't know. It was something where they ended just a few minutes after midnight. Maybe it was the budget that ended in the assembly, late, where they ended at 12:15 or something. Would you stop at midnight and have to have or would you just continue on and?
No, I'd stop at midnight. There's no problem because they're not emergencies. You get up the next day, you come to work, you do it.
Okay, so when we
12
have
to 8.
A message of necessity, you want 2/3 vote of the legislature in order to allow the message of necessity to take effect.
Yeah.
Does that need to be a constitutional amendment, or is that just a regular passage?
I think that needs to be a constitutional amendment. We'd have to change.
Okay. Well, you know,
and I've been pretty good on constitutional.
You've been successful already with that, so maybe you'll be.
And by the way, to do those constitutional changes, you have to have 2 successive, as you know, legislative bodies.
Right.
One that's elected, and then you have to have another election in that legislative body. So to get Proposition 2 to go digital, I had to get 2 different legislative bodies pass that, go on the ballot, and the voters, I'm proud to say, supported it by 77%.
And not have it taken away from you and have a Democrat sponsor it and not have your name on it. That's the other trick to the whole thing.
Yes, because
that's happened to you.
You can't have pride of authorship, because if you have a good idea, they'll just take your name off. It's very
No,
shameful.
and that's happened to
It's
you.
plagiarism.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, what's an accepted practice of plagiarism, you'd get thrown out of college for.
That's right.
Mostly, but they accept that in Senate and Assembly.
So do you still think that the 3-month legislative session would stop taxpayer-funded pontification? I mean, aren't we supposed to have discourse?
No. I think it would. I think there would still be the same delays,
Okay.
because they've learned how to only work on a crisis basis. But
Okay.
here's the thing: now we get to April 1st, all right, and now the important things haven't gotten done. What did we show after 6 months? It only took 1 week to get those
Okay,
things
so
done.
let me just
so we
ask you,
used one
did
extra
you-
week. We saved 3 months.
Did you support that omnibus bill at the end of session, or did you vote against it
The
just
Big
on
Ugly?
principle? Yeah, the big ugly.
Oh, I accepted it.
You did? Okay.
I don't vote on principle. I vote.
Okay,
I try to weigh what's best.
I'm just asking. I was just curious because we know Dov Hikind voted against all the budget bills because he didn't like the fact the education investment tax credit wasn't in it.
Well, he's got a point, because
Yeah.
they load up all these things in the same bill. Now, I'm not saying everything in the bill I liked.
But how do you feel?
They
about
should have separate areas where you can vote. But see, this is the game they play.
Right,
They put
and-
negative things in there.
How do you feel about the EITC? Do you think there should be an education investment tax credit?
What I think is this: charter schools, independent schools, what they suggest is an attack on public schools. They will all go away if we truly fund appropriate
Right.
public schools. That means high-need, low-wealth districts
Okay.
really get the funding they need, fair and equitable.
But what
But right
about-
now, we're not getting
But what
that.
about that EITC bill? When you read it, did you think that it was
Well,
okay?
there was no EITC bill. Didn't come out.
Yeah,
No, we would have voted on
it
it.
didn't come up for a vote, but it
Right.
came. But it was written as a piece
Never-
of legislation.
Never saw it. No.
Well, in principle, are you in favor of education investment tax credit?
Only if we don't correct the formula. If this formula isn't adjusted, we have to let African American and minority students have an equal shot. And they are the ones who are in impoverished districts, you see. They're the ones who have a lot of crime in their districts. They have a lot of addiction in their
But
districts.
this
They
goes to yeshivas and parochial schools, and you went to a parochial
Yes,
school.
yes.
I mean, so this would help with people from who are wealthy who want to give money. Take a tax credit, not a tax deduction
Yeah.
off of their taxes. Do you like that in principle?
In principle, it would be okay to a limited extent, but I'd have to see the bill.
Okay. All right. So there's been a lot of talk about it, so I thought
Oh, yeah.
that you would have. Okay. So now let's talk about another sticky issue since that happened recently.
The Assemblymen are really always in the controversy over
The
here.
Dannemora-
Sticky issues over here. You're really always
He's
in the
sticking-
forefront.
Yeah.
The Clinton Correctional Facility in
Yeah.
Dannemora.
Oh, yeah, the Denimore
Okay.
duo.
Right.
Two escapees.
And as
Matt
I
and
heard,
Sweat.
one elected official say that it was the Dannemora dorms that they escaped from.
Denimore dorms?
Yeah.
Well, it could have been a fraternity house, the way they were
The way
going.
they were going.
Yeah.
So I wanted to. So what do you think should be done in terms of corrective action? Because you do have some proposals, I know.
Well,
So
first of all, the governor has called what he calls a full evaluation and investigation. I don't think it is, because he's using an inspector general that he appointed. Now, you know what happens when he appoints commissions to do serious things like corruption. You heard of the Moreland Commission.
yeah.
That was the independent commission the
Right.
governor appointed. It got a little bit close to the governor, to people like Sheldon Silver and other people,
Right.
and what happened? It didn't become the independent commission anymore. It became the governor's commission.
Right.
And the governor said, I put it in place,
Right.
and now I can eliminate it. So he eliminated the commission. I don't want to see this be another Moreland Commission, because there may be some culpability with a governor who we've asked not to cut hundreds of thousands of corrections officers in many facilities because we think we're making it dangerous. We think there's not oversight, especially of the worst inmates. And in this investigation, it might show that we are too lean, we cut into the bone, and there weren't enough, not that there might be some culpability also on some of the officers, that is possible, we don't know, but there may be culpability by this administration. Even when the legislature asked him, take another look at this, we think you're cutting too many corrections officers, the guards who guard these individuals. But you know what the problem with the governor is a little bit? He thinks the three branches of government, judicial, legislative, and executive, are me, myself, and I. He doesn't think he needs the legislative, and he's a bright man. He's done some good
You
things.
say he's too dictatorial.
Too dictatorial to a certain extent, all right? So what we think is there's an outside independent commission, independent individual outside of the governor's purview who investigates this whole thing, firstly. And secondly, we have a piece of legislation which is a no-brainer you can do right now. Two things were clear. These were the worst of the worst individuals. One individual killed his boss and dismembered him. The other one shot a law enforcement official and sheriff over 20 times, then ran over him and dragged him around the parking area. These individuals shouldn't have been in the honor block, first of all. They're dangerous. And now let me backtrack and say something else. I think providing incentives through privileges to get good behavior is an important tool. But you have to have a limit on how much incentives you provide and how many privileges.
And once you get into solitary confinement, where it's 23 hours a day in confinement, you know, that's it. You don't think that there should be any leniency.
Not for this guy Sweat after what he did.
Okay.
But
So-
even for the worst of the worst,
Right.
maybe commissary stuff. But what they did for them, they not only put these murderers in the honor block, they gave them civilian clothes, which just blows my mind. And what did they use those civilian clothes for? They stuffed their bunks to make it look like their bodies with a whole bunch of those civilian clothes. So not only could they get extra time before they knew they were escaped, but so they could blend in and assimilate with the community. If they escaped with all those prison garb, anybody who saw them would know there was something wrong, but they had civilian clothes. Secondarily, Joyce Mitchell was a civilian seamstress there. They should never be allowed to be isolated with civilian that's not a trained corrections official or officer. Should never be allowed to be isolated. How do we know they were isolated with her? They had intimate contact with her in a closet. One fella says over 100 times. They used her cell phone. Obviously, there was an official looking over that. And she gave them tools to escape. Okay? So what our bill says, and it's called the Prisoner's Privilege Limitation Act, limit them in those two areas to begin with right now before the investigation is done. Don't get any worst of the worst or murderers civilian clothes, and don't let them not be guarded or overseen by a guard when they're with outside civilian employees.
And Assemblyman O'Donnell from Manhattan,
Sent a letter.
telegraphed this back in December, where he told the governor that this is in danger of happening.
Absolutely.
And it just fell on deaf ears.
Fell on deaf ears. So that's why I say we need outside independent research and investigation. Because we've seen what a Moreland Commission will backtrack after, and I appreciate the Inspector General and the job she's got, but she was appointed by the governor, and there's that part of it.
And what about the proposal of GPS chip implants on these prisoners?
I don't think it's a good idea to put chips in human beings. And, you know, and don't get me wrong, these are terrible people. These were the worst of the worst. They're murderers. But you know what you're going to run into? The United States Constitution of America. And the civil liberties is going to take us to court. We're going to be in court for years and years. We're going to be spending taxpayers' money. And I think they're going to find it unconstitutional to put a chip in the body. You know, once the judge says you got this much time in jail, I don't think you can add. And by the way, we're going to do surgery and put a chip in somebody's body so we can follow them around. I'd like to be able to know where they are. Maybe a bracelet might work. But I don't think invasively putting a chip inside a human being.
Do you like the GPS chip implants for animals, as you're an animal advocate?
I don't think that's a bad idea.
That's a good idea.
Because they're animals, and they're not human beings. They don't have a say in what they do.
Well, some of the human beings in prison are animals.
Well,
so
you're right in
I'm
defining that.
You know.
You'd think they were animals, but it's a sad and tragic thing.
Now, you know, the person who proposed this GPS chip implant was the senator from your district, you know,
Yeah.
Senator Marchione.
Yeah, well, she has changed her mind on that now. She's not supporting it.
Oh, she's not?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's...
She
Thank
said-
you for that news.
Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
Newsflash, no.
She and
I didn't
she
see
talked
that
about
get any
bracelets
coverage.
now, and
Okay.
she said she's rethought that, and I agree with her on that. I don't think a chip in a human being. And again, let me say, I know how bad these people are.
Let me ask you about do you think you get fair coverage from the reporters at the
Absolutely.
Capitol?
You know, I think the important thing for reporters, and some don't understand this, but many do, it's the character, content, and quality of an idea.
Oh, yes.
A powerful idea will overcome the most powerful of elected officials, senators and assemblymen and governors, and the most powerful forces, and I speak out to the individuals who are listening here, are you, the voters. They don't know that sometimes. And what my colleagues sometimes in powerful positions want to do is wear the voters and our citizenry down to such an extent they say, well, I'm not going to get involved in government anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore. It never makes any difference.
So
just the opposite is the case. They got to get involved more.
How do you feel when a reporter, is covering you, and then all of a sudden he takes a job with the Democratic Assemblyman? And that happened in your district, where there was a Daily Gazette reporter who now works for the Democrat Assemblyman who's adjacent to your district.
Well, let's understand this. Everybody has a bias, okay? We'd wish
Were
that...
you treated fairly by him?
I don't know how much really he did with me, or followed my words, but every reporter has a bias. And I think they try to work hard not to let that bias come through, but it's impossible. I know some reporters, when they write an article sometimes about me or look at one of my ideas, is biased. They may be liberal, progressive, they may be moderate, they may be Republican leaning. I think they try, and they know their obligation as the fourth estate, as a part of holding our feet to the fire, is to be the devil's advocate, really, to look at the glass half empty rather than half full, and then give you credit if they think it's half full. Now, are some biased? Without question. Do they mean to be biased? I don't think some people mean to be biased, but it's just, well, I think this is the way it is, and it just relates to their ideology.
I wanted to, in closing minutes, I just wanted to bring up something that was quite poignant, and I didn't want to quite leave this on a somber note, but I just wanted to, when Governor Mario Cuomo passed away, you recalled a situation where he was, where you were doing some news conference with a toll card.
Missing persons. When
Yeah,
you talk about the character, content, and quality of an idea.
So can you tell that story, pick that story up?
Yeah. I was a sophomore legislator, and as I told you, I was appointed the chairman of a task force on child abduction, missing children. Traveled across the state, had hearings. I even wrote a book. You can get it at SUNY Albany if you want. I think I sold 10.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Okay.
One day I was driving through the thruway. A fellow gave me a toll ticket. I turned around, had a picture of buckle up your seatbelt. Big space, buckle up your... I looked at it, and I drove right off the side of the road, and I said, why couldn't we be the first state in the nation to use our transportation system? Our thruway system goes from downstate to upstate to Rochester, Syracuse to Buffalo, to put the pictures of missing children. Because in my research I showed getting information out immediately, getting it to as many people to see it. They could be in another country. I called him up, his office, and I told one of his staff people, I'd like to put the pictures on our thruway system, on our toll tickets, to be the first state in the nation. He hesitated for a while, called me back in 2 hours. I never thought he would. Said, meet the governor on exit 23.
So you didn't need legislation for this?
Didn't need
he
legislation.
Did it administratively?
Governor, I said, are you serious? I went to exit 23, and they showed the film when the governor passed away,
the tape.
Breaking out of his funeral. The tape of me and the governor in that toll booth handing out the first toll ticket of the missing child, who we found in Buffalo a couple weeks later because of the thruway toll tickets. But when he came out to do the press conference, I asked him, I said, Governor, why would you come and do a press conference with me? I'm from the other side of the aisle. You're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. He said, Jim, it's the character, the content, and quality of an idea. And this idea had quality. And then he said one other thing I'll never forget. He said, if a politician doesn't blow his own horn, there's never any music. And for somebody who's only got 44 votes, going against 162 votes, I've got to
106.
blow my horn. I've got to make the case. I've got to stand up on the floor and put throngs of paper up there and debate and get that out to the media and the public and say, this is what we're spending your taxpayers on. Let us buy tablets and move into the 21st century.
You're definitely passionate.
And
And I think that was an inspiration for you when Mario Cuomo said that. That really carried you through decades of being an elected official.
it was an inspiration because he let me know that if you have a good idea, that will eventually carry the day. And the taxpayers are the most important part of a representative democracy.
Well, let me ask you this other quick question. You have, you did make a run for Congress at one point.
Yeah.
Do you have higher ambitions, and do you want to do anything in the future?
You know, I lost that congressional seat at a very difficult
because
time.
you're still here in the Assembly, so I figured that. But I just,
half a percentage point.
Yeah.
It was a time when Obama was at his highest
Right.
peak. They wanted to spend $1 trillion for a stimulus program.
Okay.
And Boehner was a genius. He had every member of his Republican unit, 250 members, vote against the stimulus. That was the biggest issue then. Okay. If I said I was going to vote against it, I would be against all 250 of my members. If I said I was going to vote for it, my Republican base would be. So it was a very difficult time to be a candidate. But then the following year, guess what? 15% unemployment because of the stimulus. Boehner won Congress. He became a genius. I was 1 year off from a good climate, a good environment, from saying, look, this is $1 trillion, but you can spend it better. Get rid of these earmarks that the deals people were making in Congress, the deals they still make to a certain extent. And that resonated a little bit, but didn't resonate more than Bill Clinton coming in and the president at his highest level.
So what do you think about?
What I want to do, people move me to run for that. Wherever people move you as a public servant, I think that's why people move to one level or another. I'm happy to be the best New York State Assemblyman I could be. If people say, hey, look, there's a spot open here, it's a different position, it's Congress, it's this, it's that, it's Senate.
You'll consider.
I would evaluate it and say, would I be better and more effective and efficient at that position? But I think I'm pretty darn efficient right now under some difficult
no
situations.
doubt, and we've talked about that this whole show. I just wanted to know if you felt that you were aiming or looking for either a congressional run, maybe for Chris Gibson's seat. If he retires, he said he's retiring.
I'm not aiming, but I'm willing to look at anything that people want to move me. I want to be at the best position
even governor?
that I could be most effective.
Even governor, if they move you?
If that was the best position and I could be most effective and enough people thought I could help their state and the quality of life, I would look at it. Because I'm a public servant. That's what I do now. By the way, you should let them know I had a real job before I became a state assemblyman.
Basketball.
I was an educator for 10 years, a varsity basketball coach. I taught kids with learning disabilities, and that's why I'm so adamant about fixing this Common Core situation and the overutilization of standardized tests, which are crushing our system right now.
And you were critical about half a loaf, that they passed a bill about Common Core's half a loaf.
Yeah, they tinkered around the edges a little bit.
So we got to wrap up because we got to bring you back again.
Yeah.
Well,
we
got a lot to talk about.
You talk well, and you're a big advocate for the people of New York State. And like Mark says, you have so many things going on. We surely have to have you back and talking about the new things that you're helping New Yorkers with, and continue your good work with good health.
We will do it in good health to
Much
you,
success.
too.